Anti-trans laws are sweeping through state houses across the country, attacking pretty much every aspect of trans existence, from healthcare to schooling.
Members of the committee, my name is Chase Strangio.
Chase Strangio has been at the forefront of this legislative battle for years and serves as the Deputy Director for Transgender Justice for the ACLU. He's also been a part of a number of landmark legal victories for trans rights in the U.S., including the historic 2020 Supreme Court decision that firing someone for being gay or trans violates the Civil Rights Act.
Here we are in 2023, and the reality is that we've reached an escalation that is jarring and overwhelming, even for someone like me who's been in this work for a long time. Now we're at a point where there are about 400 or more bills introduced in state legislatures across the country targeting the LGBTQ community. The majority of those bills are very focused on targeting trans people. And I think what's categorically and fundamentally different about 2023 is the breadth of the legislation. So we're seeing bills that would criminalize restroom use for adults, for example, which would threaten to seize custody of children from parents if the parents are affirming of their gender identity. Really insidious, criminal, and otherwise punitive measures attacking the trans communities. And then there's also the aggressiveness with which they're being pushed. Lawmakers are coming into session saying a deal has been made, it's a done deal, there's nothing that can be done. And that's a really staggering place to be as an advocate.
When did these states start shifting their focus to targeting trans people, particularly gender-affirming care in sports? When have you seen this sort of change?
If you look in the recent period of time, what we had was in the wake of the Obergefell decision, which was the Supreme Court decision striking down bans on marriage equality in 2015, after that, in 2016, that's when we saw all of the anti-trans bathroom bills. But that really shifted over the course of the period of time from 2016 to 2018. And there are a number of reasons for that. One of them was that President Trump was in office. And so there was a less emphasis at the state level because there are so many attacks at the federal level. Starting in 2018, 2019, we start to see this real rhetorical shift in the way in which trans people are demonized, both in public discourse and in public policy. And in 2020, that is the first year that an anti-trans sports bill is passed into law in Idaho. And then between 2020 and 2023, we now have about 19 states. So really quickly, we've gone from 0 to almost half the country banning trans women and girls from sports. And alongside that were the attacks on gender-affirming medical care, which have really reached a fever pitch in 2023.
What is the playbook behind some of these anti-trans bills? It seems like it's overwhelmingly targeting young people right now.
I think that we can look at some very particular organizations that are well-funded, that are operating centrally to push out model legislation that we then see across the country. There was this rhetoric that they utilized saying that, well, these are kids, we have to protect them, they don't know, what they're doing. Of course, that doesn't really hold water in any sense. If you take a step back and see the laws that they're actually pushing, it never had anything to do with children. They definitely were weaponizing false information about the medical care that adolescents receive. For example, prepubertal children do not get surgery, but they were stoking anxiety about these ideas to push these broad-based attacks on the trans community. And right now what we're seeing and what trans people have said all along is that these pieces of legislation don't start and end with trans youth. We already see efforts to ban gender-affirming care for trans adults. We see remarks from individuals at CPAC, for example, saying that transgenderism and the ideology of trans people is categorically false and must be eradicated from public life. What they believe at their core and what they say in legislatures and in litigation is that being a trans adult is a bad thing to be, and if we can stop children from becoming trans adult, that's a good outcome. Of course, the only way to stop trans children from becoming trans adults is to stop them from becoming adults at all. And that, I think, is what people really have to understand and really listen to what trans people are saying, which is, you cannot make us untrans unless you make us not alive.
Drown out the hate! Drown out the hate! Protect trans youth!
What are the effects of bans? What happens to children in those states who are looking for gender-affirming care?
These bills don't just prospectively ban care, and in many cases, they ban care for those already receiving it or those who are imminently planning to initiate treatment. So I can give the example of Arkansas, where in 2021, it became the first state to pass a ban on gender-affirming care for adolescents. Thankfully, it's been blocked in court, but the introduction of the law alone led to a spike in suicide attempts among trans adolescents in the state who were terrified at the prospect of losing care. Even if there were questions about how this care is being provided, the answer is never to categorically ban the care. If people want more research, banning the care doesn't lead to more research. What it leads to is more harm, more fear, and more families displaced by what we're seeing. And talking to these families is absolutely devastating.
What do you want conservative lawmakers who are pushing these bills to know about the effects of their legislation?
Well, I've spent a lot of time talking to conservative lawmakers, and I think that conservative lawmakers do know about the effects of this legislation. In the states where there are hearings, these lawmakers are hearing doctors tell them that this is an absolute intrusion into best practice medicine, that patients are going to suffer, that patients are going to struggle, and that some will die. They have heard young people explain that this care has saved their lives. They've heard parents beg them not to override their judgment as parents. So they are well aware of the consequences of their actions, and they do not care.
Texas legislators have been attacking me since pre-K. I am in 4th grade now.
We cannot expect these extremely gerrymandered governments, these extraordinarily voter-suppressed states to be listening to us and acting in accordance with anyone's best interests. It is incumbent upon us to take action collectively to fight back against the very insidious things that are happening right before our eyes.
Do you see this transphobia subsiding in the future?
It's sort of yes and no. In the immediate future, I think we can see nothing but escalation, and that is really scary and alarming for so many people. And at the same time, I do see changes that can't be undone. There are more people who feel comfortable living as their full authentic selves now than there were when I was growing up. And that does create a momentum. There are more people who are protesting in their schools right now against the anti-trans policies. There is resistance that is growing. I believe in the power of our continued ability to find and celebrate ourselves and hold our communities in love, moving us towards a future when we are going to have less of the vitriol that we're seeing and more of the celebratory manifestations of our really beautiful communities.
I'm Michael Learmonth, editor-in-chief of Vice News. Too often, traditional news outlets shy away from the real stories and experiences of those living through global conflicts. Not Vice News. Our reporters are on the ground, fearlessly covering the human stories that shape our world. You and millions of others can continue to read, watch, and listen to Vice News for free. But we hope you'll consider making a one-time or ongoing contribution of any size at vice.com/contribute. Every contribution, no matter how big or small, helps support the journalism Vice News brings to you every day. Thank you.